Africa Prime, brought to you by Jamison's Select Reserve.
Perhaps let me sketch a context and a challenge. Today, Africa constitutes 14% of the global population, but only accounts for 4% of the generation of global wealth. And yet, it's a rich continent, rich in natural resources, both minerals, water, agricultural land, and an enormous population, 1 billion people. And when we look at the structure of African industry, we recognize that the continent accounts for only 1% of global manufacturing capabilities. And therein lies the rub. The continent has been, for too long, from the period of colonialism, the principal supplier of raw materials to industries located elsewhere. In the past, they were in the West. Today, increasingly, they are in the East. It is time for Africa to take control of its destiny. And part of that is the recognition we need more diversified and balanced economies. We need a strong manufacturing base. Manufacturing contributes in a number of important ways to improving the standard of living of a nation. It does so because manufacturing and the discipline of producing goods is critical to the kind of technological innovation and the sophistication that economies require to move from a very basic stage to an intermediate and eventually advanced stage. And for us as policymakers, for any African economy minister, that lies at the heart of our public mandate.
Mm-hmm. But we know that there is reticence in some instances from the business community. Many people see industrial policy as increased bureaucratization. They don't necessarily see it as a rational response to economic planning. What is the opportunities within formulating industrial policy for bringing on board partners like business and saying this is an opportunity to have a more rational, more coherent approach to economic planning?
And I think what we did over the last few days is we assembled some of the best talent and expertise in the world to share with us what are the latest reflections on industrial policy. We had people as diverse as Justin Lin, the just departed chief economist of the World Bank, who now teaches at Beijing University, and Joseph Stiglitz from Columbia, and also an ex-World Bank chief economist. And the lessons from the recent period is that industrial policy is back on the agenda. And industrial policy is not only about manufacturing, by the way. It's about how to ensure that you shift the structure of your economy. Can it be done by the state alone? Absolutely not. The business sector is a critical partner because it's the individual investment decisions of companies that drive economies.
But are we going to go back to let's pick winners? Is that an approach that's sustainable?
Industrial policy has emerged from the age where governments, in many cases, try to choose, micro products and individual companies. But I think what has emerged now is that industrial policy has been crucial to identifying sectors with potential, supply chains which sometimes go beyond one sector, where capability can improve performance. I want to say something though. Okay. Just about every country has an industrial policy. It's either implicit or it talks in its own name. Take the United States. Its industrial policy has been very strongly influenced by the investment of the US government in the defense industries. Today, America has one of the most advanced defense industries, a big part of its export effort, and by the way, a great contributor to the technological base of the US that percolates the rest of the economy. The internet itself started its early days in the Pentagon. So industrial policy can either be fairly crude or it can be quite sophisticated. And the lessons globally is that there are pitfalls to avoid, and there are successes that, adjusted to local circumstance, can be emulated. So what is it that really constitutes some of those successes? I'd say one of the big successes in industrial policy is when governments support the broader issues of skills development and technological innovation, but that they also identify what is the potential advantage in their economy. For the African continent, what is it? There's really three big ones. It's mineral resources. How do we leverage industrial opportunity of the enormous mineral base
So how
on
do
the
we
continent?
move beyond extraction-based economies? How do we get that value chain going and leverage that competitive advantage, given the fact that we're playing catch-up? I mean, diamond cutters are in Israel, even though there are no diamond mines there. How do we do that, and can it even be done?
Well, the last question is clearly the easiest. It can be done. There are some successful stories. South Africa, as an example, currently, we beneficiate or we process some of our mineral resources. A very big part of our coal is used either in coal-fired power stations or in the coal-to-oil technology that has been developed in South Africa. In the platinum sector, we use some of the output of platinum in the production of catalytic converters. We have 15% of the global production of catalytic converters here. And of course, in some of the coal-to-oil value chain, we produce an enormous number of side industries, from polymers to fertilizers. And there are other examples of the use of minerals. Iron ore, some 15 to 20% of our iron ore is used in the making of steel. So it is being done, but it's being done on too modest a scale. We need to significantly increase the level of if you like, beneficiation in South Africa and elsewhere in the continent. How do we go about doing this? Well, clearly, where it is successful, we scale up. There are some general things we need to do, and there are some specific things that we need to do. There's a big policy discussion in South Africa at the moment about how best to do that. The ruling party has just had its conference recently, and at that conference, the how was a very big focus. Not whether to do it, but how to do it. Does some degree of incentive play a role? Should there be a greater contribution by state-owned mining companies to providing inputs into manufacturing at a cheaper cost? How do you ensure that the state, the public sector, captures more of mineral rents and that it supports the population and industrialization as a whole? So those that's the direction where policy is beginning to move. Of course, some of the broad cross-cutting issues go into areas like skills development, but clearly you need sector-specific approaches. The Cabinet last year took the decision that we will identify a number of specific mineral value chains. On the platinum side, we've got to look at fuel cell technologies as an example. We need to see how do we scale up catalytic converters. What are the other industrial applications of platinum?
But Minister, how do we do that given the fact that we have such a large unskilled population? Our education system is really not geared toward giving us the kind of graduates that our economy needs.
Well, I'd like to suggest that the skills issue, whilst critical, is not always where the biggest constraint is. Let me look just very briefly at three aspects to the skills space. The first is your basic operations skills that's required for capably carrying out industrial activities. I went to the BMW factory a few months ago when they launched the new production site for the 3 Series BMW. South Africa was chosen as one of a small number of places where BMW significantly expanded its investment. It's moving from about 50,000 cars to close to 90,000 vehicles, of which about 85% are being exported. And in the course of walking through the plant, I spoke to the executive director that's been responsible for the operations from Germany. And he said to me, you know, the quality of every vehicle in South Africa absolutely meets every German standard. Now that's the same labor pool that we have available for other industries and other applications. The second area is engineering. We're involved in a significant program to expand engineering output today. And it takes the form of a partnership between the business community and government and organized labor. We have a skills accord. We're confident we're going to be upping the output. And the third one is in the technical capability within the state. And here the recent roundtable was illuminating. It showed one issue. In fact, as one of the experts told us, the technical capability of many African states today exceeds that of South Korea in the early 60s when it started down this path. It's not the absence of skill. It's often, do we have the political management systems in place to ensure that we utilize the skills effectively? Today, South African engineers are all over the Gulf Arab states. They're building hotels, they're ensuring infrastructure and so on. They should be contributing here on the continent. And we can only do so by creating a conducive environment for them. Expanding infrastructure development, ensuring that the talent pool of the continent finds an opportunity on this continent.
Okay. You were saying earlier that the industrial policy is going through its own kind of renaissance, if you like. It's back on the table. It's recognized as a necessary instrument. What are you saying to the business community? How are we going to bring them on board in a continent that has a very diverse political and social landscape? It's not as if what works in South Africa necessarily works in Ethiopia or works in, Nigeria. How do we create the kind of opportunities that will work continent-wide, given the fact that we have so many, different bases from which to work in as it were?
On the government side, when we launched the FTA talks in June last year, we identified 3 things that African governments need to do. We need to build a free trade area, and that means removing the tariff restrictions in the movement of goods that originate from the continent. 600 million people, 26 countries will be covered by that. Second, we need infrastructure, critical. It's not the absence of regulation alone. It's, do you have a railway line to move your goods from country 1 to country 2? The third area that governments need to do is that they have to develop a coherent industrial policy. Now come to the business community. Much of what needs to happen must be at the initiative of business. That means integrating supply chains, how businesses can find ways to ensure that products are produced in more than one country, building off the comparative advantages of country and company. And it also means that there are new opportunities.